Good evening to those of you who are able to join me for this live stream, part 7 of our ongoing series involving Jesus and Michael and whether or not they're both the same biblical archangel. And if you've watched the prior shows, you know that we've talked about quite a number of things that usually come up, some things that sometimes don't come up, or at least not as often, when we discuss texts related to Jesus and Michael the Archangel. But we've gone a little bit deeper, I think, than in most reviews of some of the texts that involve those two individuals, or the same, but we'll refer to them as two individuals for now. However, previously I have presented evidence that I think is convincing enough to show a relationship between the two that helps us to understand better several New Testament texts that refer to Jesus, but in his pre-human form or existence. And so this show, what is really supposed to be the final part of this series involving Jesus and Michael, doesn't mean that there won't be another video, or that I won't do another video involving Jesus and Michael, or texts, biblical or related to the Bible, that involve them. But unless there's something special or significant, or unless an issue comes up beyond what we've already discussed in the prior 6 and in this 7th video, then I just don't consider it a significant enough issue. It seems like in the Bible, these texts are pretty clear in terms of who they're talking about and when they're talking about the individual and what they're doing. Okay, so if they're so clear, why do we have the controversy then? Why is it you'll often hear of Jesus as either the Son of God or as God, but rarely as the Archangel? Okay, well, let me just give a little bit of a summary of the prior 6 shows. You can see the links below and watch them on your own time. But basically, I started this series with a clip from another video I was doing that involved Jesus and questions about him. And one of them had to do with Michael. And Christian witnesses of Jah, those who, like me, believe primarily in 3 things: the God Jah, the Messiah as Jesus, and treating others the way we want to be treated, the golden rule. People who are like me in that respect, we usually see the relationship between Jesus and Michael, but we don't have a standard, a requirement, if you will. Other than the 3 things, we're trying to create a spiritual group that we can use to concentrate on the most important things and leave the lesser important things that often get in the way of those 3 I mentioned for each individual to decide, or for those who want to pursue them on their own time. But when we come together, what we try to do is teach others about Jah, Jesus, and me and you, how we should treat each other. And there are things related to it. It's not just so simple as 1, 2, 3, but those are our main beliefs. So we leave it open as to whether or not you identify Jesus as Michael the Archangel or as some other archangel in addition to Michael, because really, as you're going to see if you haven't already in today's video, there's no other way you can conclude that the New Testament describes Jesus than as an archangel. And if he's an archangel different than Michael, then we still have to resolve some questions and issues that closely associate these two with very special events. Okay, but we leave it open in terms of whether you actually conclude, Jesus is Michael the Archangel. But there's no doubt, if you read the New Testament, as we're going to read today, in terms of what it teaches about Jesus being an archangel or the archangel, well, then he's at least described that way. So we'll get to the text that is at the heart of this video, which is 1 Thessalonians 4:16. But let me give some summary leading up to it, because really, if in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 we can conclude that Jesus is described as the archangel or an archangel, it doesn't use the article there, But that doesn't mean he wouldn't be considered the archangel in the sense of the only one. But there are other biblically related texts from history, texts that involve biblical figures or issues and beings like Michael and others who are described as archangels. But in the Bible, only Michael is specifically called archangel or the archangel, and Jesus. Jesus is called, as we're going to see, archangel. Okay, and they're also described in very similar ways, right? We've discussed how Jesus and Michael the archangel, or the being described that appears to be Michael the archangel in Daniel, speak similarly. They both use the phrase, the expression, may you have peace, when they arrive. And we've also discussed how both Michael and Jesus have angels. In Revelation, in our last day text reading, Revelation 22, we read how Jesus sent his angel. And in Revelation 1, it describes that as well. It says God gave Jesus a revelation. He sent forth his angels who gave it to John. But then in Revelation 12, it says Michael and his angels fought with the dragon and threw him out. And we talked about how while some often will cite the text in Jude where Jude, a potential relative of Jesus, wrote about how Michael disputed with the devil over Moses' body, putting him all the way back there to the point prior to Joshua taking over the command of the Israelites and their army. So, and this is after, when Michael the archangel is disputing with the devil over Moses' body, that's after Exodus 23, 22 through 22, 20 through 22 speak of Jah sending his angel with his name that they're all to listen to, and that he would go ahead of them as they fought with these other nations, exactly what we see Michael doing in Daniel. So we have Michael, according to Jude, back with Moses' body and the devil, which puts him right after Jah sent forth his special angel, who then appeared to Joshua, according to Joshua 5, 13 and 14, as the prince of the army of Jehovah. And it said that when he revealed himself to Joshua, Joshua put his face to the earth and said, "My Lord, what do you want?" That was the angel that Jehovah sent forth ahead of the Israelites. That is the angel who had been with them to that point as well, along with other angels according to Acts and delivering the law and various things according to Jah's will. But one special angel, the prince of the army of Jehovah, was sent forth ahead of them, fought with the devil over Moses' body, according to Jude, unless we're going to say, as we talked about previously, that there was both Michael the archangel and the special angel, the prince of Jehovah's army, two separate beings involved in these different roles that are on the same level and fighting with the devil, ruling angels, the archangel, the prince of the army of Jehovah. We believe that's the same angel. We believe that's the angel Jehovah said the Israelites were to listen to because he would not pardon them. His name was within him. And we believe that that angel is further described in several New Testament texts, in addition to archangel, like I mentioned, 1 Thessalonians 4:16, which we'll get to. But first, notice how we made connections between texts in Jude, the earliest text of Jude, P72, Jude 5, where he specifies that Michael the archangel fought with the devil over Moses' body. So that puts him there. And then we see him going forward to fight with the other nations, just like Daniel says, according to Gabriel, that Michael was there, standing as the Prince of Israel on behalf of Israel, which is consistent with what we read in Deuteronomy 32, according to the earliest Dead Sea Scroll texts and the Septuagint. The sons of God, angels of God, were given The children of Adam according to their marked off boundaries. And this is why you have referenced in Daniel these spiritual beings, the prince of Greece, the prince of Persia, both of whom, who would not normally be working together, came forward when Michael went forth to fight against the prince of Persia because of the involvement with the people of Israel. Michael's people, he's their prince according to Daniel, the great prince, Hasar Hagadol, who would stand up, according to Daniel chapter 12, at the end time, when all would be judged, the dead and the living, including Daniel, just like Revelation 20 describes. So we've shown in these prior videos how while Michael may not have fully rebuked in the sense of thrown Satan out like he did in heaven, Revelation 12, according to the text that Jude cites over Moses' body, that has to do with the authority that he had at the time regarding the people of Israel, hence his involvement with Moses' body, whereas the devil was doing what he does and likely slandering the one whom Jah was using, though an imperfect man. But Michael stood beside him, and ultimately, according to Deuteronomy, Moses' body was buried, although some tradition holds that God took him. Either way, we don't have the extent of the text that Jude cites involving that dispute. We just know that according to the earliest Christians, even possible relatives of Jesus himself, P72, Michael was there disputing over Moses' body with the devil. And so we believe that that angel, the archangel, went forward as the prince, met with Joshua, who fell down face to the earth, prostrated himself and said, "My Lord." The same thing that Daniel does in Daniel chapter 10. When one appears with Gabriel, who looks exactly like, if not identical to, the risen Jesus in Revelation chapter 1, who comes forward as the firstborn from the dead and who's described in ways that match the being who terrifies Daniel. And so we've tried to show that there's clearly an association between these beings in these texts in ways that are unique. But what else can we use to show that there's an association between Michael the Archangel and Jesus? We know we have 1 Thessalonians 4:16 waiting in the wings. We're building up to that by providing a summary of the earlier shows. You can watch them according to the links below. But I've tried to give you kind of an idea of the things we've connected. We also saw that even in Isaiah 9:6, the Septuagint translators used angel of great counsel, angelos, according to the text at least of the first hand of Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. Whereas Alexandrinus just uses iskeros. And the second hand of Codex Sinaiticus uses theos iskeros, strong God, a strong God. And so they understood this angel of great counsel to be this strong, mighty God. The one who, according to Isaiah 9, was a child who was foretold that in Isaiah 11, the spirit of counsel and the spirit of mightiness would settle down. And the spirit of the fear of Jehovah. And so we believe that that one is not only that description of that one as a mighty God, as an angel of great counsel, is consistent not only with what we read about in terms of Michael as Hasar Hagadol and Jehovah's angel with his name within him, the archangel, according to Jude 5, but Judges chapter 13 calls him a God, the angel of Jehovah, which is what the text describes in Judges 13, 18 through 22, whose name is Wonderful, Pele, just like the Wonderful Counselor, according to the Hebrew text in Isaiah 9:6, Pele. Association appears clear. That angel guards his name, but he's described as the angel of Jehovah, the one who was sent forth, according to Exodus 23, and who has been with them, according to texts like Jude 5, Joshua 5. Now, Judges 13, that same angel appears to Manoah and his wife. These are things we've talked about in prior videos. I'm leading up to the point where we're going to discuss several New Testament texts We'll also look at your questions, of course. But if it's all making sense, that's good enough. And so we connected all those. And you can see that in Isaiah 9:6, they were looking forward to one whom they already considered a mighty God, an angel of great counsel. And that's consistent with how Michael is described as the angel who was sent ahead, and as a God according to Judges 13:18 through 22, where the angel whose name is wonderful to the point where he doesn't say it, nevertheless is described as the angel of Jehovah. He ascends in the flame of the altar of the sacrifice they made to Jehovah after talking to that angel, and in which flame the angel ascends, and they proclaim him as Elohim, the Greek text, a God. Even saying that they're going to die because of it, but then reflecting on the fact that they would be dead already if it was really God. And so proving it was a God, the angel of Jehovah. And that's why other texts say no one has seen God, even in the New Testament. Well aware of Judges 13, right? And the fact that Manoah and his wife observed the angel ascending in the flame and called it what? Elohim. Greek, a God. Yet in John 1:18, what does it say? No man has seen God at any time. Right? The only begotten God. Monogenes Theos. That one explained him. That one explained him. No one has seen God. Angel of Jehovah is called a God. There's clearly a difference that it's acceptable to Jehovah in ways where his sons who are faithful to him, not who go their own way and rebel against him like the princes of Greece and Persia, and those whom he called gods, Psalm 82, right? He enters right in among them. Did I not say you are gods? Jesus quotes that text too, John 10, uses it in his defense when the Jews accused him of claiming to be a god. We know that's what they claimed because the text he cites refers to other sons of God as gods. And he says if they can be called gods while God is judging them, then how can the Son of God whom God sent forth not be one of them or a god? Like you accused me of being, right? Let's take a look at a couple texts from John because we're going to develop this right to 1 Thessalonians 4:16. And I'm going to go ahead and split screen this so we can read together. I'm going to use the New World Translation only because it's complete in the text that we're going to read. Well, I've not translated all of them. I'm also familiar enough with the NWT in case there are issues. If you have any, feel free to bring them up. I will discuss any text critical issues or translation issues regarding the NWT if it relates to our subject. Otherwise, if it's sufficient, there's not an issue, let's read the text. Use your own copy of the Bible, John chapter 5. We're going to read 5 verses. This is essential to what we're ultimately going to show, or what I'm going to try to connect for you in terms of our point of view, or at least my own, but I know others share it too, regarding Jesus and Michael, and how we know that in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, the description of him as the archangel means, number one, he's either the or an archangel, and also based on the other associations and involvements, likely the only other one mentioned in the biblical texts, Michael. But let's move forward from John 5 to 1 Thessalonians 4:16. We may have a few texts that we get into for other books like Revelation, but we're going to be going essentially from John to 1 Thessalonians in terms of the biblical discussion in the New Testament regarding texts describing Jesus and what he would do, and texts regarding the archangel and the angel of Jehovah in the Hebrew texts that I summarized that we discussed further in our prior videos as part of this series. Okay, John 5. John 5, verses 25 through 30. This is Jesus talking according to the text, the narration of his closest disciple, John. Jesus is talking. He says, "Most truly I say to you, the hour is coming, and it is now, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who have given heed will live. Now, let me just point out here that in regards to the part of the text where it says, and it is now, when it comes to Jesus' role in raising the dead, there's two parts, at least, because, well, in the rest of the New Testament narrative involving the things he did, well, he raises the dead. For example, he raises Lazarus in John chapter 11. So there is an application, and he did fulfill the text when it speaks of him doing this now, like back then. But then it goes on. Notice in verse 26, for just as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted also to the Son to have life in himself. Everything comes from the Father. Verse 27, and he has given him authority to do judging, because Son of Man he is. Now remember in Exodus 23 in our prior videos and shows about this subject, we read the text in the context and how Jehovah sent that angel. And he said to listen to him, and he would not pardon you. Why? Because that angel was doing what Jehovah was telling him. It said that right in the context, that he would be speaking to them through that angel. And that's the same thing we have with Jesus. Ask yourself, what is the essential meaning of the term angel? Whether it's in Greek or Hebrew, whether it's angelos or malach, it means basically one sent forth on behalf of another. It doesn't always or even fundamentally mean a spirit. It's just those are the ones so often described as being sent forth as representatives of God. But it applies to humans as well. And certainly in terms of what it means, right? It's not just, we've talked about all the terms and the representation of Michael as the angel of Jehovah, the archangel, the angel who went ahead of them, who spoke for Jah, as if he was Jah, who was described as a god. We have the one foretold who would come to save Israel, and who would have these spirits of Jah, the mightiness, the counsel, fall upon him as a mighty God, an angel of great counsel. This is all what they were believing about this one. That in our C.W. Jah Talk series about Jesus as the pre-Christian Messiah, we have discussed in terms of the best texts written before Jesus was born that shows this was the context of what they thought, what they meant. And we showed that even other texts, like the War Scroll, the Melchizedek text, teach the same things, teach pretty much the same things about Michael, the gods, even about Psalm 82, and those being the gods, the spirits of Belial, the enemies of Jehovah, the one whom Michael would fight and be exalted above all the other gods. Well, that's why we see these same things in our view happening to Jesus. So here he says, you notice, he's being given authority to judge. All right, that's the same thing as the angel of Jehovah in Exodus 23. It says right there that the angel would not pardon them, right? Listen to him, he will not pardon you. And then, as I said, it goes on to describe why, because Jah's speaking through him. But it also refers to that angel in his own right. And that's what Jesus does right here. Notice, he was given authority. First, he was given the life, right? Then the authority to judge. Remember, we talked about Michael standing up at the end time, Daniel 12, doing what? Well, it describes the judgment of all those in the ground sleeping and written in the book, including Daniel, who would rise for his part at the end of the days. And here it describes Jesus as having the authority to judge. So in Daniel 12, it involves Michael with the authority to judge. In Exodus 23, that angel has the authority to judge, not to pardon, and to execute them. As we're going to find out in a minute, he's even called the destroyer. But that isn't all that he's involved with, or even what he came to do, right? Remember, Jesus even said, I came not to destroy. But they knew him as that anyway. We'll talk about it. Here in John 5, though, he says, verse 28, do not marvel at this, because the hour is coming. Okay, we talked about how the hour is coming, and it is now, verse 25, and how that involved actual people coming to life according to the Bible, right? We understand not everyone believes this, but the biblical text describes him as raising people like Lazarus. And so that's the application I would make in verse 25, the it is now. But then he goes on, describes these things, says the hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice. And his voice obviously is the same voice that in verse 25 is described as the voice, phone, of the Son of God. Verse 29, they'll hear his voice, all those, okay? So now, we're not just in the it is now, we're in the all those. Remember this part. John 5:28, all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice and come out. Those who did good things to a resurrection of life, those who practiced vile things to a resurrection of judgment. Verse 30, and then we're going to stop for a moment. Notice what Jesus says here right after he describes the authority he's given, after he's describing the life he has been given to bring people back to life. He says, verse 30, I cannot do a single thing of my own initiative. Just as I hear, I judge. And the judgment that I render is righteous because I seek not my own will, but the will of him that sent me. That's an angel, right? When you're sent on behalf of another individual, in the fundamental sense in which we define being an angel, right? A messenger. That's what he says right here. He is. He says, I'm not here because of me. Okay, so an angel, a messenger, a true messenger doesn't go because that's what they want to do, right? It's their own own objective. Another for whom they work says, go do this. Smart task for you, right? And he says, it's not my own will. I don't even seek my own will. I don't even give my own judgments. I have the authority to judge, right? I'm judging. But I don't judge. Remember what Exodus 23 described about the angel of Jehovah with his name within him? It said, Jehovah said, you listen to him. He will not pardon you. That involves a judgment. But then it goes on to say, I will speak through him. I will speak to you. What does Jesus say right here? I have authority to do judging. Verse 27. Just as I hear, I judge. I don't do it because of my own. The judgment I render is righteous, not because I'm telling you what I want. The other one, the one who sent me, the one whose name is within me. That's what I'm doing. That's exactly what the angel of Jehovah did, according to Exodus 23:20 through 22, and the surrounding context, and went forth and represented Israel as the great prince, and we believe he came down to earth and acted in the very same way on behalf of Jehovah, doing what he says, just like Exodus 23. Okay, and if you don't make that connection, that's fine. I'm just telling you what we see. But the association is clear. Jehovah sent the angel and told them to listen to him to the point of death or life, right? Judgment. Will not pardon you. Listen to him. I am speaking. It's the exact same thing right here. Jehovah is speaking. And if these words are not enough, well, we have so many, many more. I mean, I'll skip a few. I'll just go to like a few of the great ones. Let's look here. Look at John 7:15. I won't even get out of this book, but we're going to read a few more because we just read John 5, right? Remember, all those in the memorial tombs will what? Hear the voice of the Son of God and come out. But now let's take that plus the fact that Jesus said the judgment he renders is righteous and true, not because it's what he wants to do, but because it's what the other one says and does and judges. Exactly like the angel of Jehovah, the authority he had because of Jehovah, Exodus 23. John 7:15. You ask yourself, is this an angel or not? Let's set aside Archangel. Let's set aside Michael. Is the Son of God acting like an angel? Well, we just read he doesn't judge on his own. He doesn't seek his own will. He's not there of his own initiative. Okay, so it's pretty clear someone sent him, but let's take that forward. Don't forget the memorial tombs part. Therefore, the Jews fell to wondering, saying, how does this man, Jesus, have a knowledge of letters when he has not studied at the schools? Verse 16, Jesus in turn answered and said, what I teach is not mine, but belongs to him that sent me. Verse 17, if anyone desires to do his will, he will know concerning the teaching whether it is from God or I speak of my own originality. Now let's just jump forward a few more. I mean, it's so clear, right? He's not teaching what he teaches. He's not judging what he judges. He's not saying what he chooses to say, only what he hears. Now we get to, in John 8:23, he's talking to the Jews who opposed him. He says, you are from the realms below. I am from the realms above. You're from this world. I'm not from this world. Verse 26, I have many things to speak concerning you and to pass judgment upon, right? John 5, he has authority to judge, judges according to the Father. As a matter of fact, he that sent me is true. And the very things I heard from him, I am speaking in the world. They did not grasp. He was talking about the Father. Who's the Father? John 8:54. Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father that glorifies me, he whom you say is your God. Right there you have Jesus giving the totality of whom the Jews accepted as God to his Father. And he says, if that one doesn't glorify me, it's nothing. John chapter 12. One more here, and you tell me after you read this last one with me. We could read a lot more. In fact, we may read one more, John 14. But let's read John 12 first. 49 and 50. Is Jesus an angel? Functionally. Is he acting like a messenger? Yes or no? 49 and 50. Because, well, let's read 48. He that disregards me and does not receive my sayings has one to judge him. The word that I have spoken is what will judge him in the last day, right? Because whose word is he speaking? The Father. The one whom they say is their God. Because I have not spoken out of my own impulse. The Father who sent me has given me a commandment as to what to tell and what to speak. Also, I know this commandment means everlasting life. That's why he's doing this. He's not pressured. He's not coerced. He knows exactly who's sending him. Therefore, the things I speak, just as the Father told me, I speak. What did he say in John 5? The judgment I render is true. Why? I don't seek my own initiative. I don't seek my own will. I'm not judging the way I individually would judge, or I'm not doing it in that light. I'm just repeating to you the things the Father has told me. That's what I'm speaking. That's what I'm judging. He that disregards me and does not receive my sayings has one to judge him. Whose word is he speaking? The word of the Father, not speaking out of his own impulse. The Father who sent him is commanding him what to say. So you see, the Father is going to hold every single one of us accountable. The Son is doing exactly what the Father told him to do and say. Do you believe Jesus is an angel functionally? Let's just again set aside the question of Michael, of the Archangel. Just in the basic sense of going forth from one another one because of the directive, the commandment of that one, not your own will. I don't know that I've seen anyone described in more angelic messenger terms, okay? In the role of a messenger than the Son. In fact, let's read one last text here in this light. And then we're going to move forward to a few other New Testament texts that refer back to the angel of Jehovah as we bring it forward to 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and the archangel. John 14:1. He is talking to his disciples and he describes various things, and then he talks about how if they had known the Father, they would have known him. From this moment, you know him and you've seen him. So then one of the disciples, Philip, he says, well, Lord, show us the Father, and that'll be enough for us. And of course, previously, John 8:54, he had taught that the Father's the one whom the Jews said is their God. So, but he's speaking of him very personally here in ways where Philip says, well, show him to us. You say we know him. You say we've seen him from this moment on. Verse 9, Jesus said to him, have I been with you men so long a time? And yet, Philip, you have not come to know me? He that has seen me has seen the Father. How do you say, well, show us the Father? Verse 10, do you not believe I am in the Father or in union with the Father, and the Father is in or in union with me? The things I speak to you men, I do not speak of my own originality. But the Father who remains in me or in union with me is doing his works. What did we read in Exodus 23? Listen to him. He will not pardon you because I will be speaking to you through that angel. What did Jesus say in John 5, John 7, John 8, John 12, John 14? I do not speak of my own originality. I do not judge of my own initiative. I have been sent forth with a commandment on what to teach and what to say. The Father is doing these things, just like Jehovah said he was doing and talking to the Israelites through the angel with his name that was sent ahead of them. Jesus is acting exactly like that angel. He has the authority to judge the dead and the living, just like Michael, Daniel 12, and the angel of Jehovah, whom we believe is the same, having been sent forth ahead of Israel to fight their enemies, just like Michael does, Exodus 23, the angel with the authority to pardon or not pardon. And remember what Joshua said to the prince of the army of Jehovah in Joshua 5? Are you with us or are you with our enemies? And that angel was what? Standing there with a sword. He had authority to kill or not, right? Authority to pardon or not. And was sent ahead to fight Israel's enemies. Not Joshua, but even then, he's ready for it. He's not going to mess around. What did Jehovah say? Listen to him. He's not going to mess around. Why should he? He is there for Jehovah, and all these people are doing things he's tolerating to move us forward through the time where this very same one, in our view, would become something even less. That is then one sent forth by another, which is glorious in terms of the position you occupy for the one who sends you. But you have to accept that, right? Obviously, the devil doesn't accept that as a glorious position. Does the devil strike you as an angel? Everything we read about the Son of God, everything he taught, everything he judges, his will, what he does, whether he speaks of his own. Could you imagine the devil saying what he teaches is not his? That's the whole point, right? He speaks of his own originality, just like Jesus said. It's all from his own or other gods in their ways. My point is, that's why he's called the God of this system. He appears as an angel of light, according to the Bible, right? But he's not an angel of light. He's the God of this world. He's not acting on behalf of anyone else functionally. So I wouldn't say that the devil is an angel at all. I don't have any reason to believe he's acting as an angel on behalf of someone else. And he's certainly not an angel of God. And whether he was at one time before he became the resistor, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what we know of him now and his position now and the authority he has now, right? He has all the authority according to what he said to Jesus. And that's why you have texts like in Daniel where you see Michael with authority over Israel. You have different sons of God according and consistent with Deuteronomy 32:8 with authority over other nations, but the devil having control of the world and able to give authority to nations other than Israel, which was given to Michael through Jehovah. But the devil is not described in any way as functioning like an angel. The Son of God is, because he's not a separate God. He's not rebelling against Jah. What have we just been reading? I mean, he goes out of his way. We must have read 5 or 6 times in several texts in one book, not even all of it, where he explicitly stated, I'm from above, you're from below. I learned from the Father. What I'm talking to you now comes from him. I'm not speaking to you my own words. I'm not giving you my own judgments. I'm telling you what's from him. Is that not what he says in these texts? Well, that's an angel. And according to other texts, Jesus is more than just an angel. He's that, obviously, right? That's what he's been doing in functional terms. We're not talking about angels who were sent like those who visited Lot, or in other biblical accounts like those who appeared to others after Jesus was resurrected, but before he appeared to them. We're not talking about those angels who are functionally used to communicate information and do different things, but without the descriptions like great prince, archangel, angel of Jehovah with his name in him, Elohim, a God ascending in the flame. Those descriptions are uniquely associated with this special being with authority to pardon from Exodus 23 to John 5. Not because it's his own authority. He's doing the will of Jehovah, the Father, the one whom the Jews said was their God. And that's why Jude associates Michael the archangel with the dispute over Moses' body, putting him past the point specifically where God tells Moses he's going to send this angel ahead of them. After which that angel appears as the prince of the army of Jehovah to Joshua, receives unusual prostration, face to the ground, just like happens in Daniel chapter 10 when Michael the archangel arrives, appears in terms so frightening, Daniel can barely keep himself together, face to the ground. He's made better. Both the prince of the army of Jehovah and the angel in Daniel 10 are described like an earthling man, with the voice of a man, yet also as this angel, just like Jesus is described in Revelation 1 and 2 and another text in Revelation, where we have Michael the archangel battling the dragon and throwing him out of heaven right after the authority of the Christ comes into effect in Revelation chapter 12. So we've read several texts, haven't we, to show the association between this special angel, the great prince of Israel, the one who was sent ahead of Israel, who fought with over Moses' body with the devil, the prince of the army of Jehovah who had authority to pardon or not, because Jah spoke through him, just like we see in Jesus and the authority he was given according to John 5 and the following texts, which make it very clear he's acting not of his own initiative, not of his own will, not even telling us what he wants to say. He is repeating to us what the Father says. I don't know how much more angelic you could be than that. That's the perfect angel. That's the great angel. The counselor, the one who came, on whom Jehovah's spirit of mightiness and counsel settled down. He gave us all those teachings from the Sermon on the Mount throughout all these texts. We have this one not speaking of his own, yet speaking all those things in a sense that he's so familiar with, it's really what he is. And that's because he's the imprint of God's being according to other biblical texts. That's because, according to this one himself, the Father is in him doing these things. Just like the Father, the one whom the Jews said was their God, was speaking through the angel who had his name. Exodus 23. Now, 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Let's take a look at it. I told you at the start, and as we read these texts in John 5, don't forget what? Don't forget John 5:27. Let's take a look at it again real quickly, in case you did. All those in the memorial tombs would what? I'm sorry, it's verse 28. All those, the hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice and come out. The voice here is the same voice that then and in the future, just like it's described, is the Son of God, who was raising the dead then and would do so in the hour that is coming when all would rise. Now, we read further how that same one was sent forth, didn't teach his own, didn't say his own, didn't judge his own, didn't do his own will. Functioned as an angel better than anyone else you could think of. Certainly that I can think of. And I tried. No one does more in that sense than Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in the New Testament text. And we just read several from one copy of one narrative text written about his life and teachings. Now let's go to a letter written by one of his earliest followers, known as the Apostle Paul, 1 Thessalonians 4:16. This text specifically describes Jesus as an archangel. Let's read it and I'll explain why. Any text you have is pretty much going to say the same thing. There's no real issue here in terms of the translation or the meaning, really. Well, ultimately the meaning. But let's take a look. So he's talking about those who have fallen asleep, verse 15. Those who survive won't go before those who are already asleep. He says, the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a commanding call, with an archangel's voice, and with God's trumpet. And those who are dead in union with Christ will rise first. Now notice it says he'll be with an archangel's voice, with God's trumpet, with a commanding call. Here, the Greek grammar, it uses the preposition en, and then the terms with the dative. So you can, dative being a case, a grammatical case that in Greek could denote things like possession or describe things. So in this case, when it says he's with God's trumpet, well, we know what a trumpet is, right? It's something you use to make a call, an instrument. So it's something he's possessing. He has that. And when it comes to with an archangel's voice, a voice is not something you carry around, right? It's not something in a jar or in some other containment. It's part of your person. It's when someone describes someone's voice, they're describing what is inherent to that person's physicality and vocalic expression, and that's what they're describing, right? So here, it just says, enphone, in voice of an archangel. It doesn't use the article here, but I don't think that's significant because we're dealing with the archangel. There's only one named in the Bible, although there may be more. So it's not really an issue in the sense that we're getting to in this text, that is, of whether or not there's only one or many, because we leave that question open as I started out at the beginning. But the issue here is, okay, if Jesus is described as having the voice of an archangel, why don't people understand him as the archangel? Because there's no other way to understand it. Grammatically, every time you find this description where it's a text used with the preposition and then the dative form of phone, we're going to look at several texts, but it's always the case where it's describing the same being. So here he's described as with the voice of an archangel. I'm looking at a Greek concordance here. Just to make it simple, I marked a few texts that I found that just make it very clear. So if we go, for example, let's look at several texts. They're all going to be describing another being with a voice, and that voice is that being's voice. It's not a different being's voice ever when it has this grammatical construction with the preposition en and phone in the dative. So let's take a look at a couple examples in Revelation 14. So here you have in Revelation 14:7, I'm looking at the Kohlenberger, Goodrick, and Swanson Greek concordance. It's a convenient way to just look at it here and then scroll through the English version with you. And then you could look it up in the Greek text on your own. But either way, it's not a controversial issue. There's one text where the use of en, Revelation 19:17, where en is in brackets, so it's a questionable issue there. But I'm not going to use that text. Revelation 14:7, notice there that it describes those who are speaking as in a loud voice. You know, it says in. That's because it's the preposition en, which can mean in or with, like in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 with archangel. So here it's just using in a loud voice, and it's describing the voice of those speaking. Same with the angel in Revelation 9. That's describing a group of people. And that's referring to the angel flying him in heaven. I'm sorry, verse 6. But then in verse 9, another angel follows and says in a loud voice. It's the same thing or very similar, but it has the preposition. And in fact, it is the same as verse 7. En phone megale. So again, you have the preposition en used with phone in the dative, just like you see in 1 Thessalonians 4:17. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, and there it says en phone archangelu. Okay, so with a voice of archangel. And so I'm showing you that en phone is always describing the voice of the person that is the subject, not the voice of a separate person with the subject. Remember, it's the Lord descending from heaven with the voice of the archangel or an archangel. But if there's only one, the is fine. Again, that's not the issue. The issue is, who's the voice describing? Does Jesus have the voice of the archangel or an archangel? If so, he's an archangel, right? It wouldn't make any sense for God to descend with the voice of a lower being. And even if that were the case in some sense, it wouldn't be consistent with what Jesus said in John 5, right? Whose voice did he say would raise the dead? Voice of the Son of God. We'll get to 1 Thessalonians 4:16 further in a moment. But notice again, other texts where you have phone, preposition en, and it's talking about the voice of the one under discussion. So let's go to one other text. Well, a couple others. Verse 15, here's another one. Angel emerging from the temple, crying with a loud voice. Again, the voice. With, en. With, in or with is how it will be translated, but the Greek is en. Specifically, en phone megale, with a loud voice. That's how the angel is described. It's not, the angel isn't emerging with someone else crying with a loud voice. It's describing the angel who's under discussion's voice. Well, let's go to Revelation 18, verse 2. So you can see again several texts. We're going to read one other, though, that's a little bit interesting, a little bit different. First, Revelation 18:2. Notice again that it says, this angel who's descending from heaven in verse 1 with great authority. The earth is lit up from its glory. It says he cried with a strong voice. With a strong voice. It's the same grammar. En iskira phone. So you have en, preposition en, used with the dative phone. Now let's go to 2 Peter 2:16. This is the only other time, really, where I found a parallel that wasn't disputed like the one I mentioned earlier from Revelation 19:17. With the preposition "and." Often it's just phone in the dative, which can also mean in or with. The dative case alone is sufficient most of the time to convey the idea of with or in. But often they'll add the preposition as well, the preposition in this case. So 2 Peter 2:16, looking at the Kohlenberger and Swanson Greek Concordance. 2 Peter, notice this text, 2:16. It's a little different, but ultimately it's the same. You're going to see. Let me get there real quick. 2 Peter. It's one of those books. Okay, here we go. 2 Peter 2:16. And notice what it says here. And this is a different type of text. Verse 16. And he's talking about the what happened in the account of Balaam. And he says he got a reproof for his own violation of what was right. A voiceless beast of burden, making utterance with the voice of a man. So the Greek here is the same as in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Preposition "en" with phone in the dative. The actual text says "en anthropu phone," in of man with a voice. So, or with a voice of man. So, but again, just like with all the other texts we just read from Revelation, which use the preposition "en" with phone in the dative, the voice is always that of the subject. So even though it says "with the voice of a man," it's the voice of the beast of burden, right? Because the beast couldn't talk that Balaam was riding upon. But it didn't matter because the beast was used and the voice either projected or the beast allowed to speak because it said the beast spoke. But it's not describing another thing there alongside the beast that was talking because the description and even the account says the beast spoke with this voice. In other words, the description of "with the voice of a man" is describing the beast's voice, who otherwise was voiceless, but who was allowed to speak in that instance. Why? Because Jehovah was correcting Balaam and warning him of the being that was there blocking the road, right? Probably the prince of the army of Jehovah. Either way, we can see that it's always the case that with the voice or with a voice of is describing the subject's voice. Always. I couldn't find any example where it was not the case. We have several examples, as you saw, from Revelation involving angels where their voice was described because of how powerful it was. And that's what's going on here. The voice is so powerful and it's doing something so exceptional. It is described with grammar similar to the angels in Revelation and the beast that Balaam was riding that was allowed to speak supernaturally. And so in every case, it appears to involve this kind of supernatural quality for these spirit beings, or a supernatural instance as in the case of something that wouldn't normally speak, Balaam's donkey. But here in 1 Thessalonians, notice also though 2 Thessalonians 1:10, it talks also about how these very ones undergoing judicial punishment before the Lord, the glory of his strength, at the time when he comes to be glorified in connection with his holy ones. And let's see, where is it? There's a text where it speaks of Jesus, and right here, verse 7 says, "Relief along with us at the revelation of the Lord Jesus from heaven with his powerful angels." The only beings described in the Bible as having angels are God, Satan, the devil, Jesus, and Michael. Here, Jesus is again described as having powerful angels. They're his angels, right? Well, who if Michael also has angels, he's the archangel. So obviously the archangel has angels. We know that for a fact because Michael, it says, the archangel, described as the archangel by Jude in Jude 5 and in Revelation 12, and it says his angels battled the dragon and his angels. Jesus sends his angels, like in Revelation 22. Here Jesus comes from heaven with his angels, 2 Thessalonians 1:7. But in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, Paul says, further, he'll descend from heaven with a call, with the archangel's voice and God's trumpet. Okay, so we just read in 2 Thessalonians 1:7, he would descend with his angels. So that makes sense that he's the archangel. He has angels. Just like Michael the archangel has his angels. Well, here he's described with the voice of an archangel or the archangel, if there's only one. And we just showed that every time the Greek preposition en, used with phone in the dative, describes someone's voice, it's talking about the subject, not someone else's voice in addition to the subject. Even the donkey Balaam was riding, that beast's voice was described as a certain way, not someone else's voice. This is Jesus' voice. His voice is the voice of an archangel. That's why he's described as descending in 2 Thessalonians 1:7 as with his angels. He's the archangel, or at least an archangel, because he's described as having an archangel's voice. And what is more, it says that voice, in addition to the commanding call and God's trumpet, raises the dead. That's exactly what we read in John 5, right? That all those in the memorial tombs would hear the voice of the Son of God and come out to be judged, because he was given the authority to judge, just like the angel sent by Jehovah, head of Israel, was given that same authority. And that in Daniel 12, Michael is associated with in the end time judgment. Now let's take a look at another text just to show that everything we're dealing with involves the resurrection, right? I mean, the commanding call and the archangel's voice and God's trumpet are really all doing the same thing, raising the dead. That's why the whole context is about death and resurrection. I mean, even up in verse 13, he's getting all through it here, developing it up, and then he describes Jesus descending from heaven with the call, the voice, the trumpet that raise the dead. And just further on this point involving the trumpet, 1 Corinthians 15, let's go to there real briefly. We'll take a look at it. And then just a couple other texts that associate Jesus with another being known as the destroyer. But in 1 Corinthians 15, as you can see here, when Paul starts talking about the resurrection, he says, will not all fall asleep in death? Right? Because in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, he said those falling asleep wouldn't go before those or that those living to the presence of the Lord wouldn't precede those who fell asleep. But here he says we won't all fall asleep, but we will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, during the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, dead will be raised, just like he teaches in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Just like Jesus teaches in John chapter 5. And it's the same voice doing those things, the same trumpet. Jesus has it. It's his voice. He's blowing the trumpet. Now, if you go earlier in 1 Corinthians 10:10, you'll notice also that Paul's talking about those who were murmuring after they were freed from the Exodus by Jehovah. He says, neither be murmurers, just as some of those murmured, only to perish by the destroyer. The destroyer is referred to in other texts like Hebrews 11:28. Let me show you that real briefly. And I cited these texts in the description below, and you can take a look at them on your own. But that text refers to the angel that destroyed the Israelites, the angel that Jehovah sent according to Exodus 23, as the destroyer. Hebrews 11:28 says, by faith he had celebrated the Passover, talking about Moses, and the splashing of blood, and that the destroyer might not touch their firstborn ones. And the account, as we know, describes the angel of Jehovah as the destroyer. This is significant because if you take a look at other texts, like Mark chapter 1, let's do it real briefly. We're going to wrap this up here in just a few moments. I'll take a look at any of your questions. But we're very close to finishing this up. Part 7 of our series, where we've talked about all these texts from Exodus to Joshua to Judges to Daniel. We considered the sons of God, Deuteronomy 32, all the other texts like Isaiah 9 and what they had to say, including these New Testament texts that teach us about Michael fighting with the dragon, disputing with the devil over Moses' body, Jude 5. And as we know, well, we'll get to that in a moment, but here, as we know from Jude, I should mention that in Jude 5, well, we'll go to it in just a second to complement this discussion. So we've read in 1 Corinthians 10:10 about the destroyer, right? The ones who destroyed those who murmured after they were released from the Exodus by Moses. Then we read in Hebrews 11:28, again about the destroyer, the angel of Jehovah, who didn't spare Egypt's firstborn, but who spared that of the Israelites. Mark 1:24. Now in Matthew, Jesus had taught, in Matthew 5:17, let's look at that real quickly. That's a good text. I should have read it earlier. I mentioned it, but let's check it out real quickly. Matthew 5:17. Notice Jesus says here, even though he teaches, do not think I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. So in one sense, he really played down this idea of being the destroyer, right? Even with that, even though he made statements like this, that those specific to the law of the prophets, it sort of distanced him from the idea of destruction, not destroying, not coming for that purpose. Look at Mark chapter 1. Oh, sorry. So these texts in this scroll. So Mark chapter 1, verse 24, we were just there. And so I was going back to it. So we read Matthew, how Jesus really didn't, play up this idea of being the destroyer. But look at what the demon spirits who recognized him said. Mark 1:24, first verse 23. At that immediate time there was in their synagogue a man under the power of an unclean spirit, and he shouted, saying, verse 24, this is the spirit shouting out at Jesus, what have we to do with you, Jesus, you Nazarene? Did you come to destroy us? I know exactly who you are, the Holy One of God. And then it says Jesus rebuked it and said, be silent, come out of him. So here the spirit or spirits, he speaks kind of in the plural, like kind of in a legion sense, but either way, the point of the account is that they knew who he was. He didn't deny it. And the first thing they thought of when they recognized him, are you here to destroy us? Now let's take a look at a parallel account here in Luke 4:34, similar account, description. Here it says again, like we read before, in verse 33, in the synagogue there was a man with a spirit, unclean demon, shouted out, what have we to do with you? Did you come to destroy us? So this was so well known. Mark wrote it down. Luke found out about it, wrote it down. Holy One of God, he rebuked it, told it to be silent. They knew who he was. It seems like Jesus is associated in the destroyer sense with that same angel. And if that wasn't enough, 1 Corinthians 10:10, Hebrews 11:28, Mark 1:24, Luke 4:34, in Jude, and of course I'll be referring to the earliest text in P72, but in P72, but even in the text, according to the translation in the New World Translation, if you look at Jude, it's a little bit different in this case. And I referenced Jude 5 earlier, involving Michael and the devil, but it was actually verse 9. But in Jude 5, this is why it was on my mind, he says, I desire to remind you, in the NWT, this is what I was getting at. It says, Jehovah, although he saved a people out of the land of Egypt, afterwards destroyed those not showing faith. But this is not the text. This is not an instance where the divine name is quoted from an Old Testament text. They're just using the divine name because it's their interpretation of the text alluded to here, which is about the angel that Jehovah sent forth, who wouldn't pardon them if they disobeyed, destroying those not showing faith. So I disagree with the New World Translation, the Watchtower Society here. I don't think that's appropriate to use Jehovah here as a reference. It in P72 says it was a God, Christ, that saved a people, that after saving a people out of Egypt, destroyed those not showing faith. And even in the book of Enoch, if you read verse 6 in Jude, right, the next text says the angels who didn't keep their own place were reserved and judged. And in 1 Enoch, it describes Michael as fighting with those angels, but we won't get into that. It's just something to consider. And then as we mentioned earlier, verse 9, and again, I mentioned it as verse 5 earlier in the show, but it's verse 9 where Jude recognizes Michael the archangel. Okay, there he's called the archangel as having a dispute with the devil over Moses' body. And that's why we see the archangel as singular, not just because he's called the archangel, but only the archangel that is called Michael and described in terms similar to Jesus as having the authority to pardon or not pardon, the authority to judge the dead and the living, and who would stand up at that time, Revelation 20, Daniel 12. The only one who would come to Gabriel's aid, and as the prince of the army of Jehovah, the great prince, according to Daniel chapter 12. We see all these as the same being. And Jude 5 and P72 saw the exact same thing, that a God, the angel of Jehovah, who's described as Elohim, as a God, in Judges chapter 13, and who is described in all the other ways that I just referenced, from Exodus 23 to Joshua chapter 5 to Daniel chapter 12, and into the New Testament where Michael fights with the devil in Revelation 12, disputed with him over Moses' body, and where Jesus is called the God or a God, the in sense of reference, but a in sense of the text, because it just says theos and calls him Christ. So it specifies that's who it's talking about, just like Judges 13 calls that angel a God. And so they were making this association as early as the text of P72, our earliest text of the letter of Jude. And I wrote a whole translated and provide a critical edition of it in my Elihu Online papers at my Elihu Books website. But my point is that they were associating him as well in this text. Notice what it says in verse 5. Afterwards destroyed those not showing faith. The destroyer. Have you come to destroy us? That's what the spirits infecting those humans said to Jesus. They knew who he was. The angel of Jehovah, the great prince who fought on behalf of Israel, who according to Daniel would stand up at the end times, who according to John chapter 5 and Jesus' own words is described as having the voice of the Son of God and raising the dead, not because of it being his own will even, but because he was sent, just like the angel of Jehovah was sent in Exodus 23 ahead of the Israelites, so Jesus was sent to deliver the will of Jehovah, to teach what he was taught about him. And so in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16, where it undisputedly describes the Lord Jesus as descending from heaven with a commanding call, with the voice of an archangel, with God's trumpet, not for no reason at all, but because those who are dead in union with Christ will rise first. Who's descending? The The Lord himself. Those in union with Christ will rise first, right? The Lord himself is descending. The ones in union with him, the same, right? The same Lord descending is the same one whom the dead in union with Christ will rise. This one here, with Christ, is this same one here, right? Okay, so the Lord himself, the Christ, has an archangel's voice. An archangel's voice, which grammatically, enphone, can only apply to the subject, the Lord himself. How is the voice described? Archangelou, of an archangel, of archangel. The Lord Christ is the archangel, or an archangel. There is no way to read this text other than the Lord himself descending, those who are in dead union with Christ, those who are dead in union with Christ rising first, Christ being this same Lord who's descending, and being described as having this voice. The same voice that raises the dead according to Jesus in John 5, which is further described in that text, 25 through 30, as his voice, the Son of God's voice, the Christ's voice, the Lord's voice, the Christ who is called a God in Jude 5's voice, who destroyed those whom later did not believe, and who is referred to as a destroyer by the spirit demons who did not believe, but yet who knew exactly who he was. Right? They don't believe. That's what we're taught in the New Testament. The demons, they only believe because they know that there's one God, but they believe and shudder, right? They don't believe and respond, right? That's why they were afraid of Jesus. You're coming to destroy us? They believe and shudder. They don't believe in Jehovah. And Jesus is going to be the destroyer from them, right? What does it say in 2 Thessalonians 1:7? The same Paul that wrote 1 Thessalonians 4:16, that the Lord Christ would descend from heaven, raise the dead with the voice of an archangel. He says Jesus will arrive. The revelation of the Lord Jesus from heaven with his powerful angels in a flaming fire, as he brings vengeance on those who do not know God and those who do not obey the good news about Jesus. Do you understand why they called him the destroyer? The same Paul that says he's going to descend with the archangel's voice, the voice of the Son of God, the Lord Christ, and raise the dead, is going to arrive with his angels because he's the archangel and they're his angels. And he's going to, in addition to raise the dead, bring vengeance upon those who do not know God and punish them with what? Everlasting destruction from before the Lord and from the glory of his strength. Iskyros, the Iskyros Theos, second hand of Codex Sinaiticus, Isaiah 9:5-6, first hand, angel of great counsel, all the same. The archangel, Michael is his name. Not in the sense that we're to put faith, because he was not Michael when he lived on earth. He was the Son of Man, Jesus, the name given above every name, but who is also Michael in my view. You can decide for yourself. I believe these texts are clear to us. He's either Michael the archangel, the one who fought over Moses' body and who led the nation of Israel, who fought on their behalf, who stood by Gabriel when no one else would. and who is going to descend with his angels and the voice of an archangel to raise the dead and destroy all those who refuse to follow Jehovah.